Okay, our second speaker, and you'll notice that there's a theme running through this conference of the patient perspective and patient involvement. So our second talk of this session is from somebody who has had the experience of being a type 1 diabetic for 30 years. And his talk, and it's Ken Barclay who's going to speak. Ken comes from an IT background, which gave him a huge advantage, as when it came to hacking into anything, other than the HSE. So his talk is titled, "Why Did I Hack My Insulin Pump?" And we welcome Ken Barclay to give a patient perspective. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, afternoon all. First of all, thanks so much for having me here today. I'm delighted to speak to you, and it's really encouraging to see the patient perspective, including conferences like this. It's very encouraging. Okay, I suppose I'll start with the Thrive Diabetes at the top. It might not make sense. That's the name of a type 1 diabetes conference, Thrive with Diabetes. It's run by people with type 1 and by parents of children with type 1. We run that about every 18 months or so. We had one in May just gone, and we're going to have another one in October next year in Portlaoise. So you'll find all the various social media links to that there. There we go. Okay, so why is there a picture of a shopping centre in this presentation? That is the Square in Tallaght. That was opened in October 1990, and I was diagnosed with diabetes 3 days before it opened. I was very disappointed. I was really looking forward to going. So you can see that it was covered extensively in the local newspaper. Tragically, my diagnosis was not. So in 1990, I suppose just to set it on the diabetes timescale, if you like, I came after people had to boil syringes, but before insulin pens. So I was in that little window there. And there was very little technology available. So I was checking my blood sugar with blood strips, but the blood sugar meters were not in circulation in Ireland at the time, certainly not widely. It was an extremely fixed regime at that stage. So I was given a fixed amount of insulin twice a day, and then I had a fixed diet, the carbohydrate exchange system. So I had to eat the same amount of food at the same time every day. One digestive biscuit was one exchange. I still can't look at digestive biscuits. I had to eat one at 11 o'clock every morning for years. But that has evolved quite a bit. So up there is a picture of all the various insulin pumps I'd used up till about 2 years ago. Fun fact, the one on the right was the first one. They deliver insulin in 0.1 unit increments. Every time it delivered a 0.1 increment, there was an audible tick. It drove myself and my wife to distraction. But they came later, so it did start to ease. We got more flexible, more advanced insulins. We could start matching our food to our insulin, or our insulin to our food, ideally. I moved on to an insulin pump in 2003. I go to Kevin Moore as my consultant. He's very, very encouraging when it comes to type 1 diabetes and technology. So he gives out pumps. He gave out pumps early and he gives them out often, which is still great. Diabetic retail therapy is what a good friend of mine calls it every time I get a new piece of technology, which is a term I'm very fond of. I moved on to a continuous glucose monitor in 2015. That was a Medtronic one at the time. The CGMs are amazing. They measure your blood sugar every 5 minutes. So if I can do a blood sugar stick, a check on my finger, going to bed, and I can see 5.5. That's the dream number. That's the one they put on the ads. If you look at blood glucose meter ad, 5.5 will be on the screen. That doesn't mean much. Is that 5.5 going up? Is it going down? I can't go to sleep really in confidence without knowing which way. The CGM does give that. I have it. I have access to it on my watch or my phone and all the rest of it. Peer support was a big part of my treatment evolution. I'll just include that there, and Thrive Diabetes is part of it. Diabetes can be a lonely disease. I didn't speak to anyone else with type 1 diabetes until I was in my mid-20s. I'd sit in a clinic, I wouldn't look around, I wouldn't talk. But there is a community out there, and that community is really, really supportive. I'm here talking to the medics. I'm under direct medical supervision, maybe for an hour a year. So that's it. Other than that, I'm making all the decisions. I did see a study that a type 1 diabetic will make something like 180 decisions a day. It sounds high to me, but it is feasible because you need to decide on food, medication, your exercise levels. Before I came up here, literally before I stood up, I checked my insulin pump to see where my blood sugar was. So it's quite an intensive process. So the picture represents my type 1 clinic in Tallaght Hospital when I went in and mentioned what I had done. I wasn't looking for permission. So why did I hack my insulin pump? So like I've spoken about, it's a hard disease to manage. You're measuring things all the time. You're taking your medication. You're checking to see if the medication worked, and rinse and repeat. And no 2 days are the same. And I wasn't a great diabetic at all. Now, I'm quite grateful. I don't see my consultant here, and I hope he's not online. But I was a disaster, right? Absolute disaster. I was the one I'd rock into my appointments twice a year. Where are your blood sugar results? Don't have them. Are you taking your insulin? Most of the time, you know, and that my own psychological issues we won't get into. But I wasn't in a great place whatsoever. The insulin pump helped. The CGM helped. This really, really helped. So basically, there's software out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. There's software out there that really can improve that quality of life. You know, that's the big thing. Why did the heart insulin pump? Simple answer: quality of life. And as mentioned at the start, I can't resist a good tech project. So how does it work? I won't go into all the nitty-gritty details, but the first version that I used is illustrated by that picture up there. That's a battery on the left and a tiny little computer called the Raspberry Pi on the right. I heard about this in 2019, and some of that type 1 peer support I spoke about, they held a conference in UCD by a woman called Dana Lewis, who wrote some of this software. And being a techie person, I attended the conference, listened with great interest, and turned out I actually had all the parts I needed in a drawer at home. I had the little computer, I had the little radio module. So I ran straight home and built this thing. But it's all based around automated insulin dosing or automated insulin delivery. And these are now active. There's commercial systems available. I'll talk about it more in a minute. But effectively, you have your pump to deliver the insulin, you have your CGM to check your sugar, and you have a little computer to do the thinking, right? What are computers good at? Repetitive tasks. What are humans bad at? Repetitive tasks. Effectively, you tell the computer, there's my blood sugar. If it goes too high, you add insulin. If it goes too low, you take it away. I'm simplifying things greatly here, but essentially that's it. And the computer will do that all day long without thinking about it. Now, there is a significant user effort. I'm not saying for a second that any of you people should recommend what I've done, but there was a significant user effort to do it. But it does evolve, or did evolve incredibly quickly. So to move on, that's what I started with in 2019. And that's what it looked like a year later, right? So I had an Android phone, that little AirPod-like case. That's a radio module to talk to the pump. And there's 3 different flavors, all written and maintained by volunteers. I won't go into the technical details. But one thing to know, it is delivering insulin. This is potentially lethal. You know, so it had to be done with trepidation. I had to do an awful lot of checks. I spent hours reading about things. I spoke to others. I had web conferences with people. But I did put all that effort in. And again, all in that drive towards to find quality of life. So did it work? Yes, is the short answer. I started on the system in 2019. I haven't seen an A1C over 7 since, which compared to the previous 25 years is incredible progress. You know, absolutely incredible. I have hit numbers like that before, but never on a consistent basis. The time in range, which is quickly become the clinical standard now, and time in range, just for anyone who might not be familiar, is when your blood glucose is between 3.9 and 10.0 millimoles. So if I put effort in, and by effort I mean I tell my pump how much I'm eating, and when I eat it, I can be above 90%. That's really all I have to do. If I don't do anything, I'm a bit lackadaisical about counting carbs, I'll still get over 70%. And over 70% is considered very, very good. It was also a huge learning opportunity for me and my clinical team. My clinical team hadn't heard about this stuff before I came in and told them about it. I was invited in to give a presentation similar to what I'm giving today, which I did, was very well attended. I got great feedback from them. And that meant they were ready then for what's around today. So there are now commercial systems available. Let me just keep an eye on the time. We're very lucky in Ireland. We have 3 commercial automated insulin system deliveries available today: Medtronic, Tandem, and Ipsocam APS. So that's a photo of my one in the bottom right-hand corner. Very proud of my 100% time in range for 24 hours. Does not happen often, but very pleased to see it. And it's required an adjustment. So I'm now on a commercial system. But this is all prescribed. There is a manual I can ring people for support. It's not as aggressive as the open source systems. So I've given myself a year. I've given myself till May next year to see if I'm satisfied with the commercial system, or will I go back to tinkering. The Irish community really have embraced this. These systems are now being prescribed to pediatrics, and fairly quickly after diagnosis. There had been kind of an attitude that would take a year or two to know the ropes or learn the old technology before they moved on to these. And Kathy might speak more about this later on. But they're very much out there and very much welcomed. Now, I do still need some hacking my device. My Medtronic system doesn't speak to my smartwatch, annoyingly enough. So again, there's someone else much cleverer than me on the internet, wrote a little bit of software, released it, I dragged it down, installed it, configured it, and then as you can see there, not such a good number, I do include the bad with the good, of my watch. Now, just for future development of these systems, the open source stuff isn't going away. There's some very exciting stuff coming out with fully closed loop. What I've described as a hybrid closed loop. And the hybrid means that you tell it about your carbs, you tell it about your exercise. But a fully closed loop is you fire and forget. You put the system on, off you go, and you let it worry about it. We're still quite away from that. But the open source guys there's a guy in the UK called Tim Street, and he's put together a system that he uses. It's an N=1 study. He just does it on himself, but he's getting some very, very encouraging results. So it's one I'm closely keeping an eye on. And that is it. I hope I've kept within my time, Jared. But if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if anyone wants to talk to me or follow me up afterwards, you'll find me on Twitter quickly enough. Yeah.
Thanks. That was absolutely fascinating. Any questions from the floor? Okay, that's a good sign. We'll start with Anna and we work that way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can I just repeat the question for those that are online? So, I mean, Anna's question was basically, why did you have to do this? Why are you ahead of the tech companies?
Yeah, I suppose legal liability, effectively. So, as we're talking about adding insulin. It only takes an incredibly small amount of insulin to have fatal results. And for the companies that are regulated, they have to get it through the FDA, I can't remember the Irish equivalent, but it'll come to me in a second. But to get that through, you have to go through so many studies, you have to prove safety, and you very much have to err on the side of caution. And like, it drives me mental at times. Like my commercial system here, there are so many steps that are unnecessary. So I have to press down, okay, confirm, okay. But that's there so that there's no accidental thing. So they have to be incredibly cautious. And I'm certainly not calling it reckless, but when you're not subject to that kind of regulatory authority, the software can be far quicker developed.
Catherine? Just the mic is here.
Oh, thank you. Whether you were able to retain any intellectual property in what you've developed.
Sorry, if I haven't been clear, I didn't develop this software. This was written by other people. Now, I've contributed to it, and that's the nature of open source. Anyone can contribute. So I have sat down. I've made my tiny little contributions, but no, and it's actually it's an open source license. Again, I'm a tech person. I can give an hour lecture on this topic. But there's something called an open source license, where effectively you make it available to the world for free, completely open. People can go in, read every single line of code, and change it if they want to. So the concept of intellectual property is almost divorced from the open source community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, thank you.
And you referenced, Ken, the ultimate scenario of, a system which you didn't have to contribute in any way to. But that would presumably mean that you would have to take an absolutely fixed amount of carbohydrates at fixed times. No?
No. Luckily, I mean, that's where I started effectively back in the early 90s. But what that means is that the system would be intelligent enough and sensitive enough that it would actually read your blood glucose readings quickly enough, and you'd need a very fast acting insulin. So as your blood sugar rises, the system will step in whatever you eat and adjust for it. We're not there yet. I think we will get there. But yeah.
Sorry, question from Kathy McHugh.
Can I just ask you, I think this is absolutely fabulous, and it's the kind of technology and advances in it and the braveness of it that you need. So I know I'm a diabetologist, and managing the pumps, I mean, while they're just groundbreaking, the pace of them, sometimes you want to take it and shake it and just tell it, for Christ's sake, it takes 6 months to learn to give 2 more units. So it is really frustrating. Now, that said, have there been any disasters with you? Has there been any time it dumped insulin on you, or it did anything, if on the human level of doing something like this, there have to be moments when you went, oh my holy God.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember one memorable when I was trying one of the development branches. So one of the really new ones that was still under development and is flagged as possibly having bugs. And I triggered some sort of issue when I was telling it about exercise that caused it to give me insulin. So I had a couple of catastrophic lows. But what I will say, and I can say that with my hand on my heart, the number of incidents I have on the system are absolutely dwarfed by the number of mistakes I make manually. Like, we've all done the classic long-acting and short-acting insulins. You take the short-acting, you whack 20 units in, and you're running for the cupboard just to get in all the carbs. So the systems are far less error-prone than I am. I will say that much.
Another question. The mic, yeah, just, do you want to give her the mic? Yeah.
Taken control of your diabetes and you've gone and presented to your doctors, has it changed your role in how you relate to the medical profession as a person, not just around the diabetes?
Yeah, probably. Like speaking generally, yes. I think I probably am a bit more assertive and opinionated when I talk to medical professionals. Definitely with my diabetes team. But to be honest, I think that comes with time with every type 1 diabetic. And you know, my consultant has done this. You know, he'll send me into someone who's very green in the clinic, and just let me loose because he likes to see what happens. So you know.
There's a man who's offering a locum service here. Yeah. Okay. And any final question? If not, thanks.